Dear colleagues, I am Filippo Crea, Editor-in-Chief of the European Heart Journal. Welcome to our monthly dialogue. As you know by now, the dialogues are Socratic conversations among journal editors, authors, and readers. The dialogues are free and live streamed, and of course, you can ask questions. I strongly encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is becoming really very popular. And now it is my privilege to ask Professor Lina Badimon, Executive Editor of the European Heart Journal, to start this new dialogue with Professor Barbara Casadei. I'm sure you know her. The title of this dialogue is very stimulating. The title is proposed by Barbara Casadei, is The New Possible, Reflections on Our Profession and Scientific Society after COVID-19. Really a very fascinating and important topic. We are ready. Lina, please.
Thank you, Filippo. Hello, everybody. It's for me a great pleasure to be the person discussing today in this dialogue with Barbara. So Barbara Casadei is a British Heart Foundation Professor of Cardiovascular Medicine at the University of Oxford and Honorary Consultant Cardiologist at the Oxford University Hospitals of the NIH Trust, where she leads the cardiovascular theme of the National Institute for Health Research, Biomedical Research Center, and is in the steering committee of the BHF Center of Research Excellence. A little bit of the life of Barbara. Barbara graduated in medicine with honors at the University of Pavia in Italy and moved to Oxford in 1989 to undertake her clinical and research training. She was awarded the John and Richard Dole Fellowship at Green College in 1991, a PhD in cardiovascular medicine in 1995, and a BHF Senior Research Fellowship in 2001. She is Fellow of the UK Academy of Medical Sciences, a holder of the highest honor of the British Cardiovascular Society, the Mackenzie Medal, and the immediate past president of the European Society of Cardiology. And we will talk about this a little bit later. In her PhD studies at the University of Oxford, she became acquainted with basic science research, starting her studies on nitric oxide and its regulatory role in heart function. She has followed working on this area during her career and has reported her seminal findings in top journals in our field, moving from innovation to clinics and back. Presently, she runs a bench-to-bedside research program with a focus on myocardial redox biology and its impact on common cardiovascular diseases such as heart failure and atrial fibrillation. And also, she provides a clinical service at the Oxford University Hospital of the NIH Trust in the John Radcliffe Hospital. Her work has been recognized, and she has many positions of trust in scientific advisory boards of prestigious institutions and research funding bodies, both nationally and internationally. For example, she sits in the research funding body that is called the Foundation Leduc. We should get acquainted with this foundation at the ESC. The Australia Government Medical Research Future Fund, BHF, and MRC. She has received awards and given honorary lectures. For example, the fellowship of the UK Academy of Medical Sciences, the Thomas Lewis Lecture and Silver Medal of the British Cardiovascular Society, the Broadside Lecture of the European Heart Failure Association, the William Mangash Lecture at the University of Massachusetts in the US, the Michael Soul Lecture in Toronto, the Mackenzie Medal I already mentioned, the Gold Medal of the European Society of Cardiology, and the Roman DeSantis Visiting Professorship Lecture at the Harvard Medical School. Her leadership at the ESC has had high impact in the present and the future of the society, and I like to highlight that. She has brought ideas starting from the Strategic and Governance Plan on Research, the foundation of the Women in the ESC, WIN ESC initiative with the Women Transforming Leadership Program at the SAID Business School in Oxford, and the ESC Patient Forum, through which patients are now involved in the key initiatives that we are having at the ESC. More recently, she has promoted the EuroHeart, an initiative which allows continuous assessment and improvement of quality of care and outcomes in patients with common cardiovascular diseases in Europe. She has been highly active in her career and in her professional life. Her history is a story of achievement and success. All these factors have been instrumental in her election to the presidency of the ESC that she held from 2018 to 2020. She has been the first woman president of our society, something clearly important to invite our community and certainly our young members to understand the importance of women and diversity in the leading positions of our profession. So after this brief outlook to your previous activities, I like to start asking you some questions. The first I would like to ask is, this is a personal question. You graduated in Italy, as we saw, with honors, and then you moved to Oxford, where you started your outstanding career. Why did you leave Italy for the UK? And what was the trigger that moved you to change countries?
Thank you very much, Lina, and thank you for your amazing introduction. I feel like I should leave now because I can only make it worse. But anyway, what was, there is always a risk in asking a question like the one you just asked, because by the time you come at a certain age, you have a certain tendency to retrofit a strategy in what actually was a serendipitous choice of event in your life. You know, I could tell you that I had a big plan in my mind, but actually it's not true. I mean, at that age, I was particularly interested in, I was curious. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to improve my English. I wanted to take risks, you know, and that is perhaps my first message to the young people that are listening, I hope, that actually it is very important to take risks, and it's very important, you know, the illusion that one could have an interesting life without putting oneself about and taking risk is actually a problem most of the time.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, and these were the reason, really. A little bit of impulse and a little bit of wanted to do better and wanted to try something different.
So which was, then you get to Oxford, and which was your first scientific motivation or passion to do when you get there? How did you get acquainted with NO and all the story of NO? Or when did you get to NO after being there a few years for your clinical training? How was your life those years?
At the beginning, as a graduate student, my life was incredibly exciting because, you know, it is a privileged position to be. There is you know, a lot of opportunities, and in that respect, I felt fantastic. You know, perhaps one of the most exciting times in my life. That kind of beginning and the idea of having so many possibilities. In terms of first interest, my first interest has always been very much linked to something mathematical or physics. You know, it's only with age that I have learned to live with a certain element of uncertainty. But when I was younger, I really liked precision, or the illusion of precision. And so the very first things that we were doing was modeling maths and aspects related to that, and cardiovascular disease, heart rate variability, this kind of first interest, which of course was also the interest of Peter Slight, who was the head of department in cardiology at the time in Oxford.
Very well. So looking backwards, what do you think has been the most important scientific achievement in your career?
It's again a difficult question. I mean, I would, you know, for me, my greatest achievement has been to be able to published a paper in Science and a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine in the same year. So the idea of being able to cover and hopefully do a good job in more than one area. The idea of being able to have a question and take it from basic principles, if you like, to applications and to testing in humans. So, now we talk a lot about that. But when I started working on human tissue, for instance, it was regarded as being a bit of a waste of time, because of so much, the variability is so high, and there are so many things you cannot control, etc. And it was looked down a bit, and now it's fashionable, of course. But at the beginning, I had quite a lot of opposition in having. Probably I was considered to be overambitious. But I think, it paid off, and that I think has been perhaps my greatest achievement. The other one has been the people I worked with, that has been, I don't know whether I have actually selected them, or I don't know whether it's luck. There is certainly luck involved, but it has been a fantastic achievement to see so many young people really doing well and become independent investigators and being successful. And
that's very important. Creating school, yes. That's very
is a great feeling. Yeah.
Yes. So now let's ask the contrary. All stories have bad times. So what is the most difficult time in your career? What has been the most difficult time in your career?
I would say there has been a time where everything happened. In the same year, I had my daughter, which was obviously a big shock in the system and in the way one lives and one operates and one works. Plus, my head of department decided to retire prematurely, and so the whole situation became quite unstable. I didn't have a tenure, of course. And my mentor died. All within 18 months, this happened. And, it was a very, very difficult time. I didn't know, I had about 1 year of salary in my grant. I was sleep deprived, tired. I didn't have anybody to talk to in that, like, as I said, like the person that I felt was my mentor and friend. And so I've come very, very close to giving up at that time and say, well, why do I bother? Why don't I go and just be a doctor and just, what I mean.
Just one task.
Yeah,
I understand very well. That's why at the ESC we have been working to avoid this, right? trying trying to avoid this at least. Yes, very well. Now I pass the word to Filippo. He has some questions and then we will get back together again.
Okay, thank you, Lina.
Thank you, Lina. Now, Barbara, let's change page. In addition to your successful story as a scientist, you also have a successful story in the European Society of Cardiology, as Lina said right now, which brought you to become the first woman to be president of the society. What have you learned from this long and successful experience?
I've learned a lot, a huge amount. First of all, the sense of scale, in terms of as president of the ESC, you are at the head of a company, essentially, and one can have a large department or a large research group, but it's not like running a company with several departments, more than 220 employees, and it becomes the legal responsibility of the president. And so that kind of scale, I think, was a great experience to see how it might work, operating in a different system. The other thing that I've learned is that you are obviously in the membership of the European Society of Cardiology. You have so many different nations, so many different cultural backgrounds, and so to actually be able to communicate effectively with all of these people and in this community, it's also a very interesting experience. And so, learning to walk on someone else's shoes in order to really understand what the problem is and what the connection can be is also has also been a very enriching experience. And and working with the ESC staff, has been for me a revelation, in terms of, how much more one can achieve surrounded by people that one can motivate to work at their best. So that's, of course, one knows that as a senior person in a department, but even more so with that number of people. So, and one also learns to be a little bit political, more political than I would normally be in my own environment. It has been a very learning experience that I would not recommend to anyone, though, to engage with at a younger age. I mean, I was lucky to. It can be quite disruptive if one has an experience like that at mid-career rather than towards the last third of one's career.
Well, I agree with you. To lead a multinational society is challenging, but diversity eventually is a strength. Along this line, what has been the most difficult time as president before COVID-19? We will come back to COVID-19 later, but you started before COVID. So when you started, when you faced this new experience, what did you find more challenging? And what has been the most difficult time when you started?
I think the most difficult time is always the time where in any institution you want to effect change. And Rick Groby gave me a quotation from Machiavelli saying, if you want to effect change, nobody's happy, because there are those who think that are losing their privilege and those who are set to gain from the change still are not sure that they will. So you have everybody against. And that has certainly been, I certainly felt that, every time you see that there is a need for a change, it's a great difficulty to effect it and to communicate it to such a diverse group of people and make it acceptable. So I would say that is certainly been the most tricky, aspect of being a president. But overall, as I said, I had the support of the majority of the board and of the ESC staff, and that really helped me to achieve what I wanted to achieve. So I can't complain really in that respect. I have not been frustrated. Couple of times I thought, oh, this could have been done quicker, but I am not a person of great patience, so that's probably my fault rather than other people's.
Well, I found your experience as president really innovative and very, very enriching. But what has been in particular your most important achievements as president of the EAC? You have done many interesting and new things, but what has been the most important achievement in your experience?
You know, perhaps I shouldn't say that because it probably will sound presumptuous. But I think that the EAC is a bit like the EU. It sets the tone. You know, it doesn't have the power to tell anybody what they should be doing, but you can set the high ground, so to speak, and say, you know, this is what the EAC is about. These are the EAC values, and this is the mission. Every time that there was some internal doubt or internal friction, you know, I think it was, you know, the first thing that I did was to, what are our values and what is our mission? And every time we went back to that. We went back to that every time. And that, I think, really very much helped to guide us to be fair in our assessment. Of course, you're never 100%, you know, right, but it helped. You know, it really helped giving a direction. This is as a sort of general thing. In particular, I am very proud of the patient forum. It was about time that the EAC had that component embedded in the structure of the society. You know, I think we need to have the patients telling our story, really, and rather than us going, you know, to the EU and say we need more funds, we need more this or more that. Of course, everybody says that, yeah. So what makes the difference? And I am very proud of EuroHeart. I'm very proud of EuroHeart. In some way, you know, before one of the first jobs of the past president is to meet the other past president. You become the chair of the past president club. And I was really touched by how many presidents before me had tried to do it. You know, had seen that need to have harmonized variables in Europe, harmonized, you know, quality of care assessment, to have continuous patients registries and all of these kind of things. And I was just lucky that, you know, as time passes, people are a bit more open to this type of, this way of thinking and this way of practicing. Because of course, on our own, we always think that we are the best and we're doing our best. But to have that kind of quality assessment and feedback is very, very important. It also gives us a tool to ask for more funding. You know, I mean, you make an argument, you always need the data to back it up. Without the data, as I say, it's just an opinion, right? And so, yeah, I'm very proud of this, and also what I've tried to do for the younger people, which have always been and still are my priority.
Non sento più nulla.
Well, I think that we should keep a little bit asking one more question regarding this, because Filippo, I think wanted to ask you about what is the most important virtue of a person with an important responsibility. And this is something Filippo and I discuss sometimes, right, Filippo? You wanted to ask this?
Well, I didn't hear the last words coming from.
Oh, you got it disconnected.
Yeah,
I was moving to your next, because this is something that we discuss, right? And say, well, what is the most important virtue of a person who has responsibilities? Intelligence, courage, dedication, or ruthlessness? This is Filippo's, huh? Filippo's wants to put you in the verge of
this is my provocative question.
Sincerity.
I actually think persistence. You know, persistence is, I think, the most important virtue, because one has necessarily several setbacks. Very rarely you achieve what you want the first time you try, and then if you stop trying, you've lost, already. And so that ability to persist and carry on, doggedly, I think at the end, everybody gets tired of.
Yeah, you need the others also. You need intelligence, you need courage with dedication. Ruthlessness, I don't think so. Ruthlessness, I don't think so. Yeah. You can get everything if you have the prestige to ask for things that are sound and people believes in you. You don't need to be ruthless. Don't you think?
No, I don't think so. I think it is one of those myths of business, right? Most things fail in business because there are a couple of people that have this brilliant idea and they march ahead with it without taking the rest with them. And the rest, of course, they boycott them as soon as they can. So, the ability to listen and to bring people with you in a journey, I think that is really the quality that one has to sharpen. You know that you lead when the other people follow. Otherwise, you're just out for a walk.
Yeah, exactly.
They say. So I think that persistence and the ability, as I said before, to feel like you're walking on someone else's shoes, so that you have an empathy for what other people feel, and how you can explain what you want to achieve. I think those are very, very important. And I think the other one is risk taking is again.
I can tell you, dear friends, that she's right, because I've been following her. I was vice president and she convinced me of many things, giving me a lot of work.
Well, before going back to Lina with more questions, let me ask the same question to Lina, because you said, okay, the question is, what is the most important virtue of a leader? Intelligence, courage, dedication, or ruthlessness? Your answer has been, well, dedication, persistence is the #1 quality. Lina, what about you, another important lady in our society?
I support the same comment. I mean, persistence is important because you can be very intelligent, have courage, and have dedication. But if you get a no and you quit, you don't fulfill your objectives. But I think that it's very important to also have the intelligence to move people. It's like, this is what I'm saying, is you have to be the boss without raising your voice. You have to convince people. You have to show them a way that will be good for everybody, and they follow. And I think this is very important. I think that maybe this is the women's view, you see, because you asked 2 women. But in our vocabulary, ruthlessness doesn't exist, because I firmly believe it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Produce antibodies as COVID.
Okay. I've asked the 50% more important part of humankind. Lina, now I'm sure you have more.
I'm going to follow now with COVID. So if we come back to COVID, as president, you had to face this unexpected situation. This was really terrible for everybody, but also for the society, right? For how to handle things within ESC. So you were preparing with Silvia Priori and also Marco Roffi, the Congress, the important Congress of our society. So then it came that we couldn't hold it. So what was your first reaction? What you felt you could do? Because it was really an important issue for the society. And then you were looking for a plan B. But how did you manage to reach this conclusion of what to do?
Well, sometimes I get worried about small things. But when there is a big thing, I am usually very, very calm. I mean, there seems to be like a wet blanket coming over on me, and I seem to be seeing quite clearly in a crisis. So that was a crisis that flapped the EAC quite substantially, because the Congress, as you know, is such an important and such a tradition. And so the idea of, very much close to the deadline, we already had the program finished. The dinners booked, everything was ready. Then they said, no, you cannot have any assembly of people in the Netherlands. And in fact, it was a wise decision. Clearly threw up a lot of anxiety. But I thought again, this is an opportunity to go wider, is an opportunity to try something different. At the beginning, I had even the idea of having the Congress a bit like the football cup, to have it in different cities, and then to have a hybrid. At the end, we settled for television. It has to have that kind of look. Aesthetics are very important. You cannot just have one person in a square talking after the other with their kitchen in the background. There has to be a beauty for people to watch, in the same way that a television program may provide a bit of music, a little break, something different. And at the end, I think it worked. I mean, we only did probably 1/3 of all the options that we prepared, so if they are taken on next year or the year after, there is still there are a lot of ideas there to make it still exciting, even, you of course miss the interaction, the people,
But it was a success.
But you were 125,000 people, and 50% below the age of 40. These are all the things that I always wanted to see. 50%.
That was an opportunity. Yeah. So we have a couple of core questions for you. One is, how do you envisage the role of the scientific societies after COVID? Do you think that scientific societies will change in the behavior? So how they behave, what they do? Initiatives?
It's a very difficult question, because, as you see, we don't know how life after COVID or with COVID would really be like. I think we have all been changed hugely by this experience, and I think that if anything, we are even more aware of how much we need to operate and move as a community in order to have impact. So I think that COVID has demonstrated that very, very clearly. The sense of community, we at the ESC as a group belonging to our profession and to our community, I think it's more important than ever. Has always been there, but I think it's particularly important now. There are, however, also challenges. For instance, how do we deliver education? There will be more of a push to developing education online in an attractive and engaging fashion, and there is a challenge there. There is a challenge in publishing. During COVID, publishing to some extent has been bypassed. People found something, that immediately put it out there and it, it worked. Okay, there have been nothing is perfect, but nothing is perfect even after peer review anyway. So there is a challenge there. What if the scientific community decided just to communicate that way rather than going through the journals? increasingly, the charities and funding agencies that are assessing our output, they are less and less interested in the impact factor of the journal, but more in the actual impact of the discovery. What has that actually changed? They forget about you trying to get into a fancy journal. But so all of these things, I think, are more than ever in the foreground, and more than ever there is this idea that the scientific community can achieve a lot and can achieve it without the restraints that are normally, we normally have to consider. So, these are both challenges and opportunities, and the society would have to.
Into your response was my next question. That is, how do you think this situation with COVID may change the profession, the cardiology? Will it change cardiology?
Yeah, I mean,
not only publication, but cardiology, right?
Yeah, quite. I suspect quite substantially. Because, again, we've had to multitask. And so, to actually have a specialist, a super specialist, it is a bit of a luxury. So you can probably have your sub specialization in the context of being someone, though, that can also multitask and deal with the multi-morbid patients that we normally see. There is also the tension between the public health and precision medicine. Public health is incredibly important. That COVID has clearly seen that, the health of the nation rather than the health of the individual, as well as the health of the individual, play a very important part. And so, we need to consider, we need to take that kind of holistic view of the patient much more seriously than we have taken it so far. It's never been considered, to look after a patient in every aspect, has never been considered sexy. If I do an ablation, I don't need to start a statin. The GP will start the statin, or I don't need to tell a patient, look, you might be developing diabetes. And I think this is a way of practicing that is not what is going to bring, it's not what is going to be needed in the future.
Okay, so
Lina, sorry, before going to the next question, I have a question from a colleague, Lizzie Brewster from Amsterdam. And the question is about this virtual meeting of the European Society. She's very enthusiastic about this virtual meeting because allowed to many people not the possibility of reaching the meeting to really participate. So her question is about the future. She will preserve this opportunity of having a global meeting where everybody can really be linked to the meeting.
I think the next challenge is to organize a hybrid meeting that works. Because, people will still want to meet physically. People will still like to have people at their posters, at their talk, and have that kind of networking opportunity but equally, it would be important to allow people, to make it possible for people who could not come to the city or a place where the meeting is physically held to join in. So I think that is what the next challenge. I used to say it's going to have to be like the Oscars night. You have a fantastic, super glamorous event on site. A lot of people are watching and having a good time, but if they could, they would like to be there. And that, I think, is the spirit on how the meeting, I think, should evolve.
Yes.
So you foresee a global coverage not just ESC TV, but really a global coverage of the most of the meeting. Do you think is this in the pipeline? Is this an opportunity we can consider for the future?
I cannot say because it's not going to be my decision, but that is what I think it will happen or will have to happen.
Thank you, Barbara. Lina, please.
Yeah, no, following in this same issue, in reality, what we have seen is that educational activities can go in the internet, but really top research, new findings needs to be presential because people needs to discuss. And in what we have seen is that through the TCs, it's very difficult to have a discussion. And so clinical data that's coming, trials, what is really new, maybe we will need some presence, some networking, so be there. Although also there are other topics that may be very well in the hybrid part. So I think that the next presidents of the ESC will have to take the decisions in the future. So during the COVID times, it seems that women were paying a higher fee, right? In these COVID times, we not regarding employment, that's for sure, but also in many other aspects. For example, we have detected that women are submitting less amount of manuscript than men to the journals, right? And so how do you see that this situation with COVID is going to be affecting women's career? We have seen, and I already introduced it, and also Filippo asked you about this, how you have been very proactive in having this diversity included in the ESC. But because of the situation we are living through, you think that women are going to have to pay a higher toll to exit of this situation?
Well, I think that it depends on the type of society, but there has been things that would have completely flattered me as a young investigator. That is to have to do homeschooling, with all the schools closed and the children are home, and the homeschooling has fallen, depending on the society, in a larger part, on women. And but I think, it has been difficult for all the younger generations. And, Filippo knows that I always insist on promoting and pushing forward the younger generation. I mean, if I hear another person of our age calling the younger generation the snowflakes, after all they had to go through during this pandemic, right? Because they were at the front line at the hospital, even medical students. They had small kids at home. They were taking turn to look after them and still trying to fit in work and their project, their PhDs. They have demonstrated, I think, enormous resilience. And also the ability to work in a partnership as a couple, which is something that my generation hasn't quite achieved. And so I am full of admiration, and I know that it has been a very difficult time, and I know that this has set back a lot of, the progress of a lot of people. But I would like to say that there is actually plenty of time. And that this idea that you need to get a chair by the time you're 40 or this and that and all of that is all macho stuff. I'm sorry to say, it really has no value. The important thing is to actually do good work and get there in a time that doesn't destroys one's families or one's life. That people should not be rewarded for not taking the responsibilities that they should be taking towards their family and their environment. So I think that if a woman gets the chair 5 years later, it is not a matter of, is very, very honorable.
So, same. Before I pass the word to Filippo, I like to to emphasize something that you have done with Stefan Ackenbach is to be very proactive from the ESC to communicate what COVID is, what we can do for the prevention, what the cardiology patients have to do, although we have COVID also. So can you expand a little bit on this? Because this was a campaign that was very good. I think you had a very good idea, and the communication office at the ESC helped. And I think that it was an example of teamwork.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, the idea was we need to go there very early. We need to have practical messages. They need to be short, and they need to be given by people who are hands-on. And that's why at the beginning there were mostly Italian and Spanish people because they had the hit.
Crisis earlier. Yes.
Yeah, first, and so that was I think very useful to the community. The community really embraced it. We had the whole of the United States really watching this, and also the campaign that we have had two campaigns. The current one, You Can't Pause the Heart, and a previous one, We Need to Save the Lives We Know How to Save, because. Most of the time, the damage, the collateral damage of an infectious disease pandemic or epidemic, the collateral damage is larger than the hit of the virus itself. So all the people who cannot access care, who do not want to go to hospital, who are not taking, no contact with physicians and general practitioners. So that is very, very important, that it should stay in the forefront of our mind, that there aren't just, again, the COVID patients, but there is all the rest as well. Yes. And I think that helped, yeah.
It was great, yes. So now, Filippo.
Well, now I'm going to ask you to change your hat again, back to science. Back to your research work, what are the exciting projects in your pipeline?
Ooh,
if you can tell us.
There are so many. I mean, I was very fortunate to have a grant from the British Heart Foundation to look at long-term monitoring of the ECGs in the participants of UK Biobank who are in the imaging sub-study. So there are 100,000 people having repeated MR imaging of the brain, the heart, and the body with repeated cognitive assessment. And I'm very, very interested in the impact of silent arrhythmias on the brain in terms of imaging, stroke, but also cognition. And future cardiovascular events. That is, of course, for atrial fibrillation, but also for other arrhythmias. And so that is something that is very of great interest to me. The other thing that is interesting to me is to harness, if you like, the power of omics and to refine the risk of stroke in patients with atrial fibrillation. My feeling is that there are different etiologies of atrial fibrillation who can then expose to, I mean, from a genetic point of view, they can then expose the patient to a different risk of stroke. That's another interest. And I'm very much interested in a way of translating some of our more fundamental findings into patients. We've had two publications recently looking at how a cofactor of nitric oxide synthase called tetrahydrobiopterin in myocardial relaxation and in the context of diabetic cardiomyopathy. And that can be translated very easily in humans. And so I would like to do something to test it in patients. And also of, another fundamental, if you like, concept that I have been pursuing for a while is how oxidation can regulate phosphorylation and the activity of kinases and the targeting of phosphorylation. And again, we had a recent publication on that I would like, in that case, quite a large effect on infarct size. And so these are the things that I would like to translate into patients, and many others. I mean, my joy at the moment come really from collaborations. I never wanted to be an expert. I always wanted to be a student. And so to collaborate with other people, working in different environments, using advanced imaging, for instance, again, for stroke prediction, it's a great pleasure, because I feel I'm learning new things every week, and I really like that.
Barbara, I have a question from the audience, from Jan Manolas from Greece. Well, this can be the topic for a congress. But the question is, what is the best way to screen the asymptomatic population for silent cardiovascular diseases? It's a very broad question, but
this is a congress question.
It's a wonderful question at the end of our dialogue. Barbara, your comments on this wide topic.
Well, I think it depends on what cardiovascular disease you are targeting. I mean, we know what the risk factors are. For most of the risk factors are for ischemic heart disease, for instance, and so from that one can model very well, and one can also have scores and that predict patients who would have incident atrial fibrillation. But I think that the polygenic risk score, that are now coming in, as well as the use of omics when they will become less expensive, the polygenics have become now less expensive, would add another layer, because it would help us identifying particularly those patients who at the moment we would consider low risk, because say they are younger or because they are women. And within that pool, it is very important to substratify who is actually at a higher risk and cannot be picked up with the scores that we have now, which are largely determined by age and by sex. And so I think I can see that will have an impact, and it will be very cost effective, because once you have the GWAS, then you can construct polygenic risk scores for every disease. And so, with the same material, you can look at so many things. And I think that is promising, probably in the near future.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Combination of risk factors and genes really is a fascinating perspective. And now we have, as you said, we have the tools to go in this direction. Well, now I have one final question. What are your suggestions for the future of our dialogues? You know how much I value your suggestions. I always follow what you suggest and what you propose. What in regard to the dialogues?
Let's hear from younger people. That would be my suggestion. It would be nice to actually have some up and coming people who are doing very well. They're younger, and they can give the perspective of how it feels to be a mid-career researcher now. I always feel that, when you're young, you have the Young Investigator Award, and you are a student, and everything is fine. And then, you wait several decades, and people start inviting you for a lecture, and maybe they give you some accolade. In the middle, there is a long time where no one cares. And, that's why when I was with Lina in the Basic Science Council, we had the Outstanding Achievement Award. I had a similar thing in the British Cardiac Society, to reward people in that desert, of appreciation in the middle. And you know, I think you can have a couple of people in that part of their career that will give you a more contemporary view of what it is like.
Well, I look forward to receiving your specific suggestions. Well, this concludes our dialogue. I wish to thank Barbara and Lina for this intense and interesting dialogue. And I'm happy to announce that our next dialogue will be on Thursday, as usual. The last Thursday of the month will be on Thursday, 27th of May, sharp at 5 p.m. Central European Time. Well, again, thank you, Barbara and Lina. It's been a wonderful hour, and I wish to thank the audience, of course, for their participation to the meeting. And next time, please ask more questions. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Barbara. A great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Barbara.